Welcome to another Patreon video, guys. In this video, I'm gonna break down my animation process step by step, applying everything we've been seeing in these last few videos about the 12 principles of animation. So let's get to it. So you might have noticed that we have an animation of Piglet in a bar, and there's a fun story about why this exists.
Nah, nothing.
This is the animation we're gonna break down.
Nah, nothing.
So for now, I'm going to mute it. So the context for this project is I had a class with Maxime Delalande. He was an animator on Klaus. And I know you may think like, a class, aren't you a professional? But something I want to make very clear is that professional is not the opposite of student. Amateur is the opposite of professional, but we will always keep being students for the rest of our lives if you desire to. Or at least I think we should be, because there's so much to learn in this craft, even if you're already working at a professional level. And who better to learn from the people who are at the top of the industry. So he gave us the exercise to, he basically gave us this shot from The Shining, this one. And that's the background that we have here. And we basically had to animate and act into the audio that you just heard. And we basically could give it any context that we wanted. But yeah, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to break down basically what decisions I make when, and also what I learned from animating with animators from that caliber, because the students in the class were, I don't want to name drop, but also like really good animators in the industry. One caveat that I have to make here is this is gonna focus on Western style animation. This is not for anime, because anime focuses more on like having very few drawings, but like really good drawings, but very few. Here we want to go full on frame by frame animation with all the in-betweens and all the bells and whistles. And obviously, another caveat, there's going to be a lot of granularity to the things that I will mention. This is my process with most scenes. Of course, depending on your character, your scene, and your project, you may require different steps. Here we go. The first thing, whenever I'm going to animate a scene that I want to do, is warm up. And I cannot stress enough how important this is. So there are a couple of ways that I like warming up. One is like literally if you can, if the character is well known, or if you have the character sheets for the animation you have to make, then actually go and study it. Don't trace or anything like that. Literally do studies of the character from famous shots. I basically got this reference sheet, let's call it, and looking at his expressions, how he moves, what's his personality, and I did studies of that and other shots, as you can see here. But it's just getting comfortable with drawing the character. The other way to warm up, which is crucial, is doing some gesture drawing before starting. Just, it doesn't matter if your character is not anatomically like a human. It's just to loosen up, to start getting your creative juices flowing, and to break that like the stiff poses that you will do at first. You will thank me if you start warming up, I promise you. Once we're more comfortable with the character, we are not yet ready to jump into the animation. I would actually go to the audio and study what the context is, how I want to portray the scene, how I want the acting to be with the character. What subtle movements can we have? How can we break away from all the generic options that we would do? Basically try to avoid cliches. And I want you to think of action and reaction, because you can see here in this audio that there are two characters talking. So you also have to think of when the other character is talking, how does your character react? He cannot just be dead all the time. He has to move, he has to react. So action and reaction. So in this scene, it's very simple. You just hear a woman say, "Why?" And he says, "Nah, nothing." He doesn't want to talk about it. So that's the idea that I wanted to convey. He's just being pensive about something. He gets the question, why? And he just thinks about it. He's like, God damn it. Gets sad about it and he says, nah, nothing. So you can see that change of expression, which is also very important. I would, if you can, showing a change of emotion in a character during a scene makes it feel alive, because there's no way to see a character, even if it's just drawings, changing from one emotion to another and not think it is a living being right there in front of you. It is not just drawings when it's able to feel emotions. Another step that I would do before the rough animation, and here I didn't because it was like a very clear shot, but it would be making a perspective grid. I will normally go with a white line and just throw some lines on top. going towards the vanishing points. So here's one. See, this is why I didn't do it here, because it's very obvious. And the other one, well, we can see the lines on the floor. It's here like this. So, you know, this lines would continue. It doesn't matter. I'm just being very broad with it. So I'm just going to free. But this is just so you can feel the volume of the scene. Obviously, I would lower the opacity. But I do highly recommend having a perspective grid with very low opacity, but just enough so you can feel the volume of the scene. And that way you will never draw something that's out of perspective. So once I made some decisions about how I want my acting to be, it is really important to think, is my acting appropriate for the production or for the character? I have a story about this. The first version that I did for Lackadaisy, let me find it. When animating Ziv is a character that's very mellow and slow, and he's like perpetually groggy. And this was the first version that I did.
Is to say, it beats.
I found it. And this was the first version that I did.
Is to say, it beats radiator fluid.
What's that aftertaste?
So he tries a cocktail and it tastes awfully bad. So I wanted to portray that, and I thought, well, I knew he was really mellow and slow, but I thought maybe it would be fun if I can contrast it by moving him a lot. And obviously,
Is to say,
this got immediately rejected. So all this goes to waste, and I had to change it. And in the end, this is actually what I did.
Is to say, it beats radiator fluid.
What's
So
that
you can see it's
aftertaste?
way more toned down.
Is to say, it beats radiator fluid.
What's that aftertaste?
So that's what I mean when I say you have to think, is my acting appropriate for the character and the production style? Also in Lackadaisy, they didn't want us to use a lot of squash and stretch or like they wanted us to be really grounded and realistic. And that's what allowed me to confidently animate him in other scenes like this
Upstanding
one.
citizen, you know?
He said, bent over his illicit beverage.
Oh, thank goodness. I wasn't sure you were alive.
Right, so it's very subtle.
Ziv.
And here we're gonna see some decisions that I made when animated Piglet, how he would move. And I think the best way to showcase this is showing how he was gonna enter the scene. I had to cut that because of time, but check out the walk cycle that he would have. It's over here. Right, this is more in line with a Piglet. Okay, so you warmed up, you studied the dialogue, you know what you want to animate. So now we're gonna get into the rough animation. In here, I cannot stress enough how important it is to apply this lesson from Eric Kohlberg, which was you don't want to start with an anatomically correct version of the character. You rather start with the emotion, with a really sketch out pose that carries the information of how you want the character to feel, and then you can think of how can I make the anatomy match this and the proportions and all of that, but it comes later. First, you want to focus on the emotion, and that's the first thing that I would do with a rough like this. Piglet's a fairly easy character to draw, so I guess this is the roughest. I went with the poses. See, this is how rough I went with some of the poses. This to me conveys enough for me to know where this is going. That's the level of rough. But it is fine to start with something along the lines of like, let's say I want to make him sad. They just a line of action making him sad. Think of like the ears. Maybe we can see his nose. Maybe like this is his arm. Let's say he's sitting in the bar, right? Something like this. Let's say he's sitting in the bars and like he's standing backwards towards the camera, and then I don't know, he turns to look at us. Always thinking of like the line of action of the character, simplicity to one side and complexity into the other. It's all the things that we've been seeing, but the main thing, I'm trying to convey the emotion of how he feels. And that's how I would approach each one of the key poses. Feeling on top of anatomy. Later, I would try to find how can I match the proportions and making the character be on model and all of that. And which are my key poses? Well, I would first focus on the accents. The accents are the most important parts in the dialogue. In this example, it's very obvious because there are very few words. So the accents would be when the woman says why and when he says nothing. Also when he deeply inhales. This is a very important part of the animation. So these are the most important keys for me. And then I would focus on what are the most important poses for me to convey the feeling to the audience. Thinking of action and reaction, he's playing with a glass. When he gets told why, he looks at the person. But I need a moment where he thinks about it. This is really important. So it's this. And look at the squash from here to here. I want him to really get squashed while he's thinking of the memory. Then he inhales. This is him inhaling and then falling on the table. And here I did something that's very Piglet. And this works really well in most animations, which is when we scream or when we open our mouth, obviously what opens is the mandible, goes down, right? But in animation, you actually want to leave this part still. And what you want to open is the rest of the cranium. So go like this. And it looks better. So that's how I'm making him talk right now. Instead of him just speaking like this, I want him to be, and it's just so much more interesting if he lifts his nose. So those are the type of decisions that you have to make when animating a character on its personality. Of course, here I'm thinking of silhouette, the line of action. You need to remember staging and exaggeration and push the essence of the character's personality and how he feels in the moment and make it really clear. Once I have my key poses, which are this, we go to this. And then we know we're going over here. But how do we go there? Well, we pass through here. Those are my key poses. Then we can focus on our breakdowns. Remember, if our keyframes are the what, this is the what is going on. The breakdowns are the how. How is it going down? How am I moving from one pose to the other? And here's where it gets really interesting. Remember what Richard Williams said. Any artist can draw great keyframes, but it is in the breakdowns where we as animators live. And that's where we give the personality through acting to our characters. So the first thing you're gonna notice in my breakdowns is the squash and stretch. So for example, when he's gonna go from here to here, so I know from here to here, I'm not just gonna move him, I'm gonna do this, right? So I want to have a drawing where we have a lot of squash, and then how does he land? Immediately he gets super squashed, and then I can go back to his proportions. So right, you can feel this. I'm leading with this part of the head. It's fine to drag some certain parts of the character, like the ears and the forehead, they are dragging, but the rest of the character, whoop, and he speaks. Also with subtle movements, like here, when he moves to one side or the other, I want the mouth to drag a little bit. You can feel it in his cheeks. Also the ears, of course. So from here to here, how do we go from here to here? Well, I need an anticipation. And then whoop, overshoot and drop down. That's the key to making subtle acting and avoiding it looking stiff. It's this subtle squash and stretch. It's the same fundamentals that we've been seeing. I'm gonna go back to the first version when he was just entering the room. And I want to show you that this sphere that represents his head, how it was entering, it's not just a sphere, it has squash and stretch. And you can feel it, right? I'm gonna zoom in so you can see it clearly. But even if it's just a forehead, you can feel a little bit of squash and stretch. And that's why if I play the animation, see, it feels, it feels the squash and stretch. But yeah, so you're thinking of squash and stretch in your breakdowns. You are thinking of favoring what is closer to the last drawing or the next one. I guess this is the clearest pose where we want all this part of the character to be very, very close to the next pose, but everything else is dragging behind, and you can feel the line of action, how it does this. You also want to think of the follow through of the action, which is the ears, for example, have to solve the amount of energy that they have. They can't just stop. They have to keep moving until they resolve that energy. And of course, whenever you need them, you need to think of where do I need anticipations and overshoots and then settles. Another tip I want to give you is to try and tilt the pieces as much as you can. Right here, you can see the character's head. We're doing something like this with the head. So it's not so boring. So not everything is parallel always. We have all this range of motion and we can have him look to one side, to the other. You can also use more than one breakdown if the animation is looking too even. So here, from here to here, I had to go with an animation like this. And this arm was really important. I had to solve, how do I make this type of movement? And the only way to do it is through several breakdowns. So you can feel it here, this type of spiral movement. So once we have our keyframes and breakdowns, of course we're matching it with the audio, but now we need to think of our spacing. And I'm not sure if I have my spacing charts. I actually think they are here, but what's going on? What is this? Oh, yeah, there they are. So I do have my spacing charts. They just were too far away. So let me just scale this down. I guess at some point I scaled it up and they were lost. But yeah, remember in your keyframes and breakdowns, you have to define from one keyframe to another, where is my in-between? I would try to avoid just in-between right in the middle because you get an even spacing, so that's constant velocity and it honestly gets pretty boring. And one thing that I love doing, let's see if I can find an example here. It's not guaranteed, but I shall. That's funny, here I had a different ending. You can see after this, he did this, he turned. And again, you can see when he's turning, you have a breakdown like this, where his arm is already going forward, but his head is still looking backwards. So the body is looking forward, then the body is already in the final position, but his head is tilted. It's tilted like this, and it's lagging, like the top of his head still lagging behind until he gets to this pose. I'm gonna be honest, I liked that acting, but I decided to change it just because I wanted to show the other students that I could do more. I wanted to push myself, but okay. So I think that acting is fine, but yeah, that's why I did this, because I wanted the character to feel more volumetric and to do more stuff. I thought it was funnier if he just had more subtle acting that shows the volume. This is what I wanted to show you. So a fun spacing chart that I learned during this class was this one, which is instead of having something like, let's say I want to do deceleration and this is drawing 1 and this is drawing, I don't know, 13. Everything teaches us that deceleration would be here. You have drawing 3, 5 right in the middle, 7, 9. Let's do this 11 so it's not so long. And yeah, you actually end up with a distance that is closing in. The problem with this is you can see the distances are diminishing by not so much. So it can read, it's obviously deceleration, but it can read as constant velocity. So a very interesting way to work with charts. And I want to make this very clear. I'm not saying you have to do this every time. This is when you want to push your spacing. You would do, let's say, this is 1. And let's not do 11. Let's just do 9. But what you would do is you would do thirds. But one of them you would ignore. So let's do thirds. The distance here is just divided on 3. But one of this, you would actually draw an X. Which means this exists so the in-betweener knows this is thirds. But you won't draw this frame. You just know it's there. And now you can do the same. Half, half, and half. 3, 5, and 7. But look at what happens with the distance now. It is giant and then it diminishes very quick. Now the spacing is super snappy. And I love it. And this is what I did actually here with the body. It is a bit on top of each other. That's what it looks so ugly. But I'm just going to move this so it doesn't confuse you. But here I have a chart for my body, which is applying that. These are thirds. But then I have the just acceleration. Things are very close together. And then they separate a lot. Then this is how the head moves. It moves forward faster. And the head and the arm actually do the same. I don't know. I guess I had a change of heart with the arm. I wanted to do something different, but then I did the same. But this is just indicating how I want to in between from here to here, I guess. From one key to the next. So you need to think of what you're doing with your spacing in each one of your movements, from one key to another, or from one key to a breakdown and then to the next key. What is your spacing? Do you want acceleration, deceleration, or constant velocity? Those are the 3 options. But now you know that you can use resources like this to really push your spacing and make it more snappy. And try to not in between right in the middle, because again, it's just gonna feel like constant velocity. I've always found it's better when you try to make a snappy spacing. Like, it always looks better than when you try to play it safe and have everything. If you look at my first short film, my graduation film, Memories for Sale, everything is in between, in the middle, and then the middle, and it feels so slow. Nothing is snappy enough. And I think that snappiness, well, at least I enjoy it a lot. There are directors. I've animated in a project for Disney called the Disney Descendants, where the director would not allow spacing like this. No, everything had to be really slow, really cushioned in, and also breakdowns have to be really subtle. I unfortunately cannot show any animation from that. But yeah, you can search for it. Disney Descendants. It was a TV movie. Another important thing when in-betweening is remember it's very easy to lose your motion arcs. So one example in this scene where I had to be very deliberate is stuff like this, like him lifting his eyebrow. I had to be careful to maintain this sort of arc. And also when he like rolls his eyes, I wanted you to feel that curve of movement. And that is only like, there's no way to convey that on the keys. It has to be in the in-betweener who maintains that. So you have to be very aware of it. But yeah, motion arcs are way more interesting, like this one, or again, the one with the arm here, this. That is all the in-betweener, so you need to be careful with that. So we went through our rough poses thinking of emotion over anatomy, then we drew our key poses thinking about staging and exaggeration to push the essence of the character's personality. Then in our breakdowns we were thinking about squash and stretch, favoring, anticipations and overshoots, and follow-through of the action. And of course, for our in-betweens, we wanted to push our spacing so the animation kept a really snappy movement. And if any of the terms that I'm telling you are like, what is this guy talking about? Go back and watch the videos that we have here on the Patreon on the 12 principles of animation, because we went through all of this. Here, I'm just trying to put it all together, but if you want a more nuanced explanation, you have the past videos. So finally, let me give you some tips that I've learned along the way that have helped me a lot. One of them is, it is important to give the characters enough time to think. So in my first short film, I was afraid of just holding a pose. But after looking at the entire project, I realized, oh my God, it's missing so many holds because we want to feel the characters thinking. So right now, when the woman says, why? I actually have Piglet looking at her, but then I have a hold. This doesn't go immediately into this. I leave this for several frames because I want the character to feel like he is thinking.
Why?
So whenever you can and you have enough time, leave a hold for your character to think. I promise you, it's gonna feel like he is alive. Also, when interacting with a prop, for example here the glass, you want enough time for him to stop moving it and then let go, because that way you convey it has weight. If he just very quickly leaves it, for example, if I'm gonna pick up this pencil, I would rather have two drawings, one where I touch it with some fingers and then one with others and then pick it up, and not just like it's magnetic and it goes with my hand. We want to have enough time for the character to pick up or interact with things so it feels like they have weight. That happens when characters interact with any prop. Finally, you have to be really aware of the character's expression at all times, especially the eyes. Never lose sight of what the eyes are doing, what they are looking at, or what your character's expression is conveying. This happens more often than you would think, but you want, like right here, I wanted him to be like with lost eyes. He's not looking at anything in particular. But before that, of course, we know like he is looking at her, then he rolls his eyes and he's just remembering. Right, but this is all conscious decisions of what I want him to do in the acting. Because the eyes is where the audience is going to be watching. It's just a natural reflex of us humans as an audience to look at the eyes of the character. So never lose sight of that, no pun intended. Finally, the only way to absorb everything that I've just mentioned is to do it over and over again. I'm gonna give you a list of all the steps that I was thinking of in this Patreon post. I guess I'm gonna call it like my scene approach. But don't be afraid if it looks like, oh my God, that's so much work. I honestly don't have a list. It's just the things that come natural to me after doing it over and over again, and it will happen to you as well. I know I'm glossing over a lot of things. I just wanted to like have a video that puts together everything that we've seen in the 12 principles of animation videos, but I do plan on making more videos on like fundamentals like lip sync or acting, because there obviously are a lot of nuances to that and a lot of granularity depending on what we're animating. But I hope this was helpful to you, and yeah, let's look at the animation one more time.
Why?
Nah, nothing.
It is very simple, but I do feel for a moment it feels like the character is alive. And yeah, remember, every line that you draw, you're one line closer to your dreams. Thank you for watching, guys.